Hello, friends. It's me, your favorite comic book artist's favorite comic book artist, your favorite toy collector's favorite toy collector, and your favorite horror enthusiast's favorite horror enthusiast. That's right, I'm Jax, and I'm here with my new friend. I think we'll call her Mary. Anyways, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my time at Gathering of the Ghouls from this past weekend. It was my first time exhibiting as a vendor at a horror convention, and there was a lot of happenings, shall we say, at this convention, both good and bad. And I'll kind of go over a little of each. I want to highlight the positives. Some of the so I guess the best thing to do first is to talk about some of the downsides of things. Being that it was my first horror convention, and maybe some people weren't familiar with who I am and the work that I do, sales weren't tremendous, but there were other factors associated with this. For instance, it was being held in a brand new location, and there were some technical mishaps. Internet didn't necessarily keep up, or Wi-Fi didn't necessarily keep up for some vendors. And the biggest issue was they had gotten some air conditioning installed into the Rawhide Event Center, and they paid tens of thousands of dollars for it. And it wasn't necessarily hooked up correctly, as was some of the power overload. So fans shut off, outlets burnt out, and some of the AC outputs for the cold air, especially my corner where I and a couple of people that I got to be friends with were sitting, were way high up. So the cold air was coming in way too high, and the intake sucking out the hot air was down low, and it should have been hooked up the other way. So the weekend was somewhat uncomfortable. It was also very, very humid, so it wasn't just heat, it was muggy inside. And this may have contributed to people coming and then leaving right away, or, coming on Saturday and then not coming back on Sunday. This has definitely affected attendance. It definitely did affect sales for quite a few people, but I feel like it did potentially affect sales for me, even though this was my first convention as a horror vendor. I would say it was an overall very, very positive experience, because before attending the show, I sat down with my dad and we talked about some stuff that didn't go very well at Tucson Comic Con. And he gave me some really, really good suggestions, two of which were to have a sheet that would keep track of demographics of the people coming up to the table, interacting with me, and if they did more than just walk past, like if they actually walked up, flipped through some of the portfolios, pointed at the prints or looked at the stickers, said hi. The idea was to keep track of potential age groups. I mean, obviously, sometimes it's hard to gauge whether someone's in their 20s or their 30s, or their 30s or their 40s or 50s or 60s kind of thing. But also keeping track of gender. And sometimes that was difficult because some people were completely covered head to toe, and you just kind of had to do an educated guess. There was what I would do with this as well is put down a little P for somebody in that demographic that purchased something. And then I would also write return next to the purchase if it was somebody who came by, looked at things, left, and then came back. And there was a handful of people who did that. So there were a lot of successes in that manner. The noise level in this arena was a little tough to hear because they were playing music the entire time. I recorded a couple of clips that I can't use because it's copyrighted music and I'll no doubt get dinged. And then on Sunday, they were able to fix the outlet between myself and the next table, and it was this huge industrial fan, so it was very noisy. My hearing is barely coming back this morning because of it. The ride home, it felt like when you're in a plane and it's not that your ears need to pop, but it's that pressure that builds up, like you can't hear very well because of all the really heavy white noise going on. That's basically what it was for most of the weekend, especially on Sunday. Um, my dad also gave me the idea of having a really quick 3-question survey of asking people what they liked about the table, what they didn't like about the table, and what they would like to see in the future. And then if they wanted to add their email address so that if they were interested in things, I could update them on new appearances, new books, projects, things like that. I didn't hand out any of those surveys. Part of it was a little bit of nerves, but also part of it was very, very hard to hear. So presenting that with somebody when I could also just talk about the product seemed to be of help. I did pick up some really cool stuff that I'm going to show you, but a little bit about the sales. The stickers seem to do pretty well. I did learn something very specifically about my prints. People saw the displays where I had the large scale prints up. I had the portfolios down below where people could look at the prints a little bit closer. And I sold a handful of prints. I didn't sell a ton of prints, but all the prints that I sold were the small versions of the prints, which is a really good indicator of maybe large scale prints are not the way to go in the future. So that's something learned. That's a positive. The other really, really cool thing that I learned is none of the mainstream or more mainstream prints sold, right? People liked the Jason Voorhees print. Nobody bought it. People liked the Gamera and the Mothra, but nobody bought those either. They did buy those stickers, but they didn't buy the prints. People were buying the Sadako print was well received. The La Bruja print was well received. And then I also sold the Something is Killing the Children and a La Llorona. There were some good comments about the La Llorona. One young woman was saying, I like that you didn't kind of romanticize her. I forget her exact words, but she said, a lot of times with the imagery and the storytelling of La Llorona is she's made this central character and you've made her this very haunting visage. And I was just like, well, yeah, that's the story we were told as kids, right? Like, don't stay out too late. Everybody knows the story of La Llorona. Like, if you grew up in the Southwest, especially in the southern part of Arizona, like closer to the Mexican border, if you didn't hear the story of La Llorona, like I either don't believe you or maybe you don't remember being told that story. The La Bruja was well received, I think, because of the colors and the way I drew the horns and the skull mask and everything. And there was one woman who came up, she didn't know La Llorona, she didn't know La Bruja, and she didn't know Something is Killing the Children. Like, I told her a little bit about it. She bought all 3 of those prints together in one purchase, which lends me to believe that the art itself speaks to these people, right? When they see it, they see something they like the style, they like the colors being used and the work being put into it, which makes me really happy, because even though I would like to move all of the prints, it's really nice to know there's an appreciation for, folklore and legend, but also my style specifically. And maybe it gets people interested in reading Something is Killing the Children or looking up more about La Llorona and the history of Mexican folklore and legend and culture, which would always be a good thing. The book was well received as well. Welcome to Pleasant Falls. I sold a handful of copies of that. All of chapter 1 that I sold was the special Gathering of the Ghouls cover. There was one family in particular, when they came up, they were asking about it. There weren't a lot of comics there. I may have been the only artist vendor selling any comics. So that was something that I think lent itself to a lot of people as well. But there was a family with a young woman, maybe in her teens, and they were talking about it, and I started telling them a little bit about it, which made me realize you need to come up with your definitive elevator pitch, because you're still tending to ramble about this and not having really clear answers as to what Welcome to Pleasant Falls is. But when I was talking about it and talking about how Venita is very isolated in this suburb, and she doesn't have any friends, she's not there to be friends. She's not the main character, as you will. She's very much survive, look out for myself, turn 18, graduate, get the hell out. And so the mom is like talking to the daughter, and there were two brothers, and the daughter just like her head goes down, and she's just like, oh my God. And I was just like, is this hitting a little close to home? And she's like, very. And her mom looks at her and she's like, well, what do you think? She's like, I want the comics. And something I did with this that I didn't do with some other times I'm presenting my work is I took out the special cover, the Gathering of the Ghouls cover, and I put it down and I showed them. And then I took out the second print of the one shot and put it down. Told them about the special that I was running for it, for both books together. And I didn't immediately put them back on the display. I left them out. And it was subconscious at first, but then I realized, you've left them out, leave them out. This is part of the hook of getting people to buy it. You put it back, there's less perceived value with that, because you're immediately dismissing the work that you've put into it, the book itself, the characters and everything. So I left them out. And mom looks at the daughter, and the daughter's just like, I really want the comic. And so, mom paid. Even though mom was the one who paid, I put the P for the demographics under the daughter, because I'm like, she's the one who made the financial decision, right, for this. Got some really, really good, a lot of people liked the kaiju sketch cards. A lot of people liked the kaiju stickers. The Jason stickers sold pretty well. I sold a good variety of the stickers. Again, not a ton of stickers got sold, but it was still a lot better showing than at Tucson Comic Con. And I was messaging with my friend Richard and Sin and Gloria and Ned, and just going over some things. And Richard was just like, so it sounds like having stuff that is very, very genre specific is helping. And I'm like, it was definitely helping people stop, look, point. My dad giving me feedback that even though him and his wife don't go to these types of shows, comic book shows, horror shows, and etc., when they saw the picture of my table from Tucson Comic Con, they both felt overwhelmed by the amount of merchandise that I had. So the horror show was a lot better in terms of paring down the amount of things I had on display. So I had to not maximize, but make the most of the amount of merchandise I was bringing. And even though sales weren't as good as I was expecting, or hoping, I should say, there was a good variety of pickups. There was a good amount of feedback that I got, and keeping track of those demographics, I think, is going to help for the future. That might be something I share at another time, but I do want to review it with my dad. But let's go ahead and go over some of the really, really amazing stuff that I picked up. First of all, as I said, this is Mary, or at least that's what we're going to call her right now. Mary, I picked up from Midnight Studios FX. There was a woman walking around, and she had like a little like strap purse thing with her Mary like this, right? And it almost looked like it was almost like a baby carrier with it. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? And so she showed me, and she's like, no, it's soft, it's squishy. And I'm like, this is amazing. And she said, go over to Midnight Studios table, talk to them. The guy has really, really good deals, and they do all this stuff out of house. And some of it is production grade and working on like shoots and movies and stuff like that. So it's really, really cool that I was able to pick this creature up. I need to get myself like a nice stand for her. She's a little lumpy on the bottom, so right now she's just kind of leaning up against stuff. There's a little bit of hair on her. Of everything that I've ever owned in my entire life, like this thing is probably going to be the one that gives me nightmares. So if you feel so inclined, check out Midnight Studios FX. They do some top-notch work, and the pricing of their items is some of the prices were a little bit too much for me to be able to afford, but definitely within that value range. Like these things could have been selling for at least 100 or so more than they were. So I'm really happy to have little Mary as a part of our horror family now. You might notice this really, really cool shirt of Daria and Jane's, kind of a black metal shirt. I picked this up as close to first thing on Sunday as I could, and that is from Creep Cake. I was walking around Saturday morning before the show, and I saw their table, and then walking around Sunday morning, and I was like, I gotta get this shirt. Like, I love Daria, grew up on the show, of course, and not enough people do fan stuff of a show that was so culturally relevant for an entire generation like myself. So check out Creep Cake as well. From Warlord, who I met and talked to at the very beginning of Sunday, and then went back to as my very final purchase of the show, I picked up this really awesome The Craft shirt. And we talked a little bit. They saw that I was an artist. I gave them my Instagram sticker card, my Jax Loves Nachos card, and immediately got followed by Bruce from Warlord. And they said, we want to keep in touch. We like to work with artists, especially local artists, to make some of the merchandise and stuff that we have. And their shirts were really, really amazing. One of the cool things, and I made note of it, I was just like, look, this is something that is super important, that you're not going the cheap route or using AI. And they're like, we definitely don't believe in anything like that. So that was huge for me. I got a couple of selfies with two celebs, CJ Graham and Alex Vincent, which I will post up on screen when I'm showing and talking about that experience with them. Before that, right next to me at table 14 was Monster Man Images, which featured the young apprentice. His name is Josh Hensley, and kind of the old master who's been doing special effects for some of the projects he worked on like 40 years ago. Joe or Joseph Dolanek. He is credited with about 15 different movies in the special effects department. He's worked with John Carl Buechler on movies like Creepazoids, The Unholy, The Blob, the remake from 1988. There's going to be a story to go with that I'll pop a picture up here as well. From Beyond, and that is a movie that I just recently watched. The story was a bit much for me, but the effects were amazing, and it had both Barbara Crampton, Ken Foray, and Jeffrey Combs in it, who, like, those are horror mainstays, and I love those actors. And to meet a special effects artist who worked on that movie and so many other movies, like the Garbage Pail Kids movie, I don't know if you guys remember that. It's one of the worst translations from like a hot property to an actual movie, but Joe worked on that. He also worked on Vicious Lips, which I've seen. In fact, I believe The Unholy on this list of 5 or 6 movies is like the only movie that I haven't watched or maybe don't remember watching. Anyways, on From Beyond, he was in the fabrication crew, and he's credited with mechanical and makeup imageries. And I got to talk to him and Josh a lot. The joke was there was John, Josh, Joe, and there was another guy at the table next to them, and I forget what his name was, so he just called himself Jeremy, so it would just be a continuation of Jay's. And so when he said that, I was just like, well, it's because your name is Jeremy. And so every time I saw him, that was just that joke. um, so on Sunday I saw on the back wall behind um, Monster Man images, Joe had this, it's kind of 3D art before 3D art. Um, so this like movie poster, but you can see it's one of those plastic mold to make the 3D image from Beyond. And I had asked Josh, because Joe was pretty modest during the entire shoot or the entire weekend. I asked him, is this for sale? And he said, yeah. And I was just like, well, how much is he asking for it? And he said, yeah, the thing says best offer. And I was just like, and he goes, let me see if I can find a range. And so I talked to Joe about it. And he was just like, I tell you what, I'll give you a range between $1 and $1,000. And so I made him an offer, and he was just like, yeah, I'm insulted. And I'm like, okay. And he shot me an even lower amount. And I'm like, well, I'll give you this. And he goes, well, I didn't ask for that. And I was just like, well, I don't have the change to make the difference on it. So this is what you're going to take. And I would also like you to sign it. And so Joe is got some health issues. He has Parkinson's, so he has a very, very shaky hand. He apologized profusely for the signature, and I said, sir, the idea that I'm sitting next to and getting to talk to somebody who did special effects and makeup work for movies I've seen, movies I love and appreciate, and as a part of the industry that I love and appreciate, means so much more to me than how the signature turns out. It's getting to talk to you and knowing that I sat next to somebody who is part of history in this industry. I think there's a big part of some of the younger generations, not that I'm that young, but some of the younger generations that watch these movies and don't necessarily appreciate the intricacies and the nuance. Like, you can watch a movie that you didn't necessarily enjoy but still appreciate an actor's performance, or like the writing that went into it, or the lighting that was used in it. Like I said, from Beyond, I didn't necessarily care for the story itself, but I love those actors. And at the same time, the effects for it were awesome. Like, all practical effects well before CGI became mainstream. One of the downsides, even though I love, I got my degree in animation, right? So I should be all for CGI and everything. But there's something about practical effects, and a lot of fans of like Star Wars can attest to this. Like, all the original first 3 movies that were done with practical effects and miniatures and like tricks of photography and things like that, when they've done anything more than the digital remasters that they released, there's a lot of that magic that's lost, and a lot of that magic that doesn't stand the test of time. The rigs that are holding people up, or the half melted off face. And if you're doing that now with CGI, it looks that way. And even if it looks great, in another couple of years, when new technology comes out and new things come out, it's going to be lost, and it's not going to look as good. So talking to Joe and Josh, like, learning that, yeah, this is something that you can go to school for. Guys like Tom Savini have schools where you can go and you can learn to be a makeup effects artist. But a lot of it is learned on the job, right? It is, pouring molds, making, what do they call it? It's not a mold of the face, but it's like, yeah, making a mold of the face, and making the negative and filling it, and how to use your mixtures right, and the right consistency for corn syrup and food coloring and stuff like that to make realistic looking blood. And some of these movies that have set strange world records for the most amount of food, corn syrup used in a movie production or something along those lines. Um, it's just really interesting to get to sit and talk to somebody about that. One of the movies that I mentioned was The Blob, the remake from 1988. And Jameson Newlander, who's more well known for being um, one of the Frog brothers, Alan Frog. I think he was Alan. Yeah, Alan Frog in The Lost Boys. And he's also in the third movie, um, was in that Blob remake. And there was a gentleman there who loves Joe's work and is probably Joe's biggest fan, which is cool to see as well. Went over and talked to Jameson, and Jameson came over and talked to Joe for a good 15, 20 minutes and like thanked him and everything. And it was just kind of a nice moment to see that somebody, this movie was made in 1988. That's like close to 40 years ago. That's 37 years ago. Coming over and reuniting with somebody who worked with him in a very behind the scenes type thing. Like we see these effects and we're wowed by them, but at the same time we don't see the faces of those people. Like we know Tom Savini, and we what is his name? The guy who did the effects in Baker, I believe his name is Baker. That for American Werewolf in London. We know some of those really, really big names. Like you might even know John Carl Beekler, but you don't know the guys who worked under them. You don't know the people who worked on the smaller productions, right? You know Canby Effects, right? Everybody knows Canby Effects. They are the industrial light and magic of special effects. And it really, really matters. And so getting to snap a few candid photos of Jameson talking to Joe was really cool. And I'm obviously showing those right now. But really special to be able to talk to Joe and talk to a protege and somebody who's apprenticing and learning how to do these things in Josh, and hopefully being able to maintain a friendship with them and, learn some new things. And Joe was offering like other artifacts and pop culture memorabilia from some of the stuff he's worked on. And I'm just like, I mean, I would, more than anything, I would be honored to have pieces of history owned by somebody who worked on those things, right? Like it's kind of neat when you're like, oh, this is from so-and-so's private collection. But that was just a surprise, like a very welcome +5 integrity, to my journey and my first vending experience at a horror show. But I look forward to many, many more. Now I got to also meet CJ Graham, Jason, from my favorite, and if it's not your favorite, Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6. I don't want to know who you are. I've loved that movie for a really, really long time. There's so many interesting facts about that. I actually want to print that, I think it's Intrepid Studios put together for the show. I didn't get it signed by CJ Graham because I already got something else signed by him, and I was doing my best to be as not frugal but intelligent with the money that I spent. So I got the selfie with CJ. He was super, super nice. He was joking around with probably everybody, but I had forgotten some of the things that I meant to take up to the show with me. And one of them was a foam machete that I bought at Spirit Halloween last year. But have no fear, because CJ was selling actual machetes that you could get signed. And these are legit machetes. He told me several times, please be extremely careful with this. It's real. you don't want to hurt yourself. He was just like, how old are you? And I was like 47. And he's like, oh, sorry, you got to be 48 to buy this. So this is my machete, which will be a centerpiece for my Jason Voorhees display collection. You've got CJ's autograph right there. Is Jason in part 6. At 18 kills. That might be the most kills in any Friday the 13th movie. And then you've got the hockey mask that he drew. One of the really interesting things is like, I didn't know if he was still going to have these. Like, I saw them on the table and I was just like, I got to go get one, and I got to get one before he potentially runs out. And so he had it on the table, and, you know, he wipes it down and everything. And I was just like, but can we do the selfie first? And he goes, but it's not autographed. And I was just like, I don't want the autograph to show up in the selfie. Like, I want that to be a separate experience. He was like, okay, cool, whatever you want. And so he got up and we took the picture that you're seeing right now. And, you know, just thanked him and everything. And he also had zip ties that he brought with him. And so they zip tied the machete closed so you couldn't pull it out, which I thought was extremely intelligent. And so this went into my big suitcase that carted off one other major piece of memorabilia and a completion piece. Those of you who may be following some of the videos that I've done this year know how much Child's Play and the Chucky character mean to me. And getting to meet Brad and Fiona Dourif at Mad Monster, and then Christina Lease at Tucson Comic Con, and Alex Vincent, Andy Barclay was at Gathering of the Ghouls, and he was the final piece. Unless I can get a hold of Jennifer Tilly and Don Mancini, like, those are going to be the only other missing pieces. So now, my Good Guys doll is complete. You have Brad here, Fiona here in purple. You've got Christine right here in green, and you've got Alex. I wanted to call him Andy, in dark blue. I'd asked him if he wanted light blue or dark blue, and I told him I wanted everybody to have like theme color on both the comic, on the doll and the comic. And he was just like, let's do dark blue. And so then I also had him sign my Child's Play 2 comic. And when I showed Richard via Instagram, he was just like, that might be the coolest book that you own. And I definitely do not disagree. Child's Play 2, issue number 1 from Innovation. I've picked up 2 copies of this year. This is the slightly sharper copy. It's, you know, very fine near mint copy. First signed by Brad at Mad Monster, of course, to John, Brad Dourif, Chucky, Christina Lease, again in green to match and be uniform because I'm weird like that. But at the same time, I think they're very fitting companion pieces. And it says Kyle as well. And then, again, I wanted to call him Andy. Alex Vincent as Andy in dark blue. This is one of those books that I don't know that I will get slabbed. I know sometimes CBCS offers like free verification with grading or whatever. The grade number doesn't count, but the preservation of the book is really what matters to me. And I asked him about if Don does any conventions, and he said not really. He doesn't do a lot of like public appearances and things like that. Got to talk to him quite a bit. Very, very nice guy. Still stands as one of those testaments to my thoughts that a lot of the people who work in the horror industry are some of the nicest individuals. Like in real life, they're like, you know, they're not horrible human beings that you hear really bad things about like 20, 30 years later. I mean, there are your outlier exceptions, but for the most part, everybody that I've met who worked in horror, Kane Hodder, C.J. Graham, Bill Johnson, Brad Dourif, Fiona Dourif, Christina Lease, Alex Vincent, uh, uh, Joe Dolinek, just down-to-earth people who love what they did or do, and part of it is just that art that they love to create, and that's kind of like myself. I'm nowhere near any of those levels, but hopefully somebody who's reading my comic, somebody who is looking at that print right now. And the other neat thing is I asked people if they wanted the print signed, and everybody said yes. Nobody said no, which was really, really cool, because a lot of times people who collect prints or like prints, they don't necessarily like them signed, or they want them signed on the back. But it was really nice that people were like, yeah, please. Some people were like, is it extra for a signature? And I was like, God, no, you're buying something from me, or you've brought something of mine from a previous show or whatever. I don't know. I'm just happy that you want to read whatever I've written, or have a copy of the print that I've drawn, or what have you. Yeah, so overall it was a very positive experience. Sales definitely can get better. I've got a lot of good demographics for interactions, and knowing maybe more who my audience is, and then maybe next time trying to do that in the moment marketing analysis, where I'm asking people to take those surveys. I just didn't feel as confident to do that right now, but I'm making those steps and those strides with this, and each little step is going to make hopefully this journey a little bit easier and ultimately more successful. So I am very, very happy that I got to be a part of Gathering of the Ghouls. All the parts of it that were hard, like the AC not working and the noise level in the convention, and that no doubt contributing to attendance changes and sales changes and stuff, is something that isn't necessarily within their control, but they did talk to people about that and said that they're going to be reaching out in the next few days, in the next few weeks, to try to set things right. I just want to say thank you to Gina and everybody who was in the front offices, who, when they realized that they had more spaces opened, they did reach out to me early on and say, hey, we're in a new vicinity or in a new facility, so we'll be able to take more vendors. Would you like to be a part of it? And I snapped up on it. So it was technically the second show that I was approved for, but it was the first show that I signed up for. So I'm really, really glad that this is under my belt, and I have these experiences, both good and bad, to know where to go from here, and to have some of these great memories now that are going to be core memories for the rest of my life as I go forward. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you went to Mad Monster, what was your favorite part of it? Hoping you get to see this. If we interacted, let me know that we interacted, and if there was any questions that you have, please feel free to ask in the comments. For those of you regulars, I would say, again, your homework assignment is from what I've shown you of the things that I picked up, or from my stories of my experience at the show. What is your favorite thing that you heard? If you've sat through the entire 40 plus minutes of this video, I do want to say thank you for just the interest that you show in my work, and it means a lot. And in these tough times, sometimes these escapes mean a whole lot for me, for you, for other people. And I hope you are taking care of yourselves, and you're taking care of those who mean the most to you, and taking care of this amazing horror community and industry that we all love. Until next time.